Grace and peace. Welcome to Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative YouTube channel. I'm your host, Apostle Cheryl Richardson. Listen, the entire purpose for Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative is igniting hearts, inspiring minds, and safeguarding destinies. We want to save lives, and we want to safeguard the destinies of those who are being victimized by domestic violence. Now, previously, we recorded a video recognizing a domestic violence victim, 10 clues. This video is entitled Recognizing a Domestic Violence Victim, 10 More Clues. 10 more clues. Okay? And so before we get started, I want you to take a few seconds and subscribe if you've not done so already. Once you subscribe, you can click on that bell to schedule your notifications to the frequency that best suits you. Feel free also to comment, to like, and share. Every time you share a video, the potential to save a life, to correct the trajectory of someone who is struggling with domestic violence is increased. And so we appreciate you partnering with us by sharing our videos and sharing our channel. Now, we're going to talk about 10 more clues, 10 more. And the reason that we're doing this is because often victims don't recognize that they are victims. They don't understand that what they are experiencing is, in fact, one facet of domestic violence. And so there's no attempt to leave because they don't recognize that they have a right to leave. They don't recognize that what they're being subjected to is not right. It is not fair. It is not warranted. Okay, so let's look at 10 more clues. Number one, does he or she seem to be sick often? Now we know that men can be victims of domestic violence as well as women. And as you've heard me say in previous broadcasts, anyone can be a victim. Absolutely, anyone can be a victim. And anyone can be an abuser. And so does he or she or you seem to be sick a lot? Complaining of headache, complaining of stomach ache, just general malaise, not feeling well. They never feel well. Or you never feel well. It's an indication that something else may be going on, okay? Number two, does she or he express fear of their partner's anger? Now, we're not talking about some mild concern about the partner being upset or not being pleased with something that they've done or being disappointed in them. But do they seem fearful? Are you fearful of your partner's anger or displeasure? Okay. Number three, does he or she worry that someone might find out about the problems in the relationship? Are they really, really worried about someone finding out? Are they committed to keeping it a secret? Do they come unglued when you suggest that they share this information with someone else or that they seek help? That's another indicator. Number four, does she or he suffer from feelings of guilt or depression or anxiety or extreme frustration? Do they feel like a failure? Check this out. Because of their partner's behavior, not their own. They feel depressed, they feel anxious, they feel like a failure because of the way their partner conducts him or herself. That's another indicator. Do his or her children, or if we're talking about you, do your children either, number one, cling to you? Are they extremely anxious? Do they struggle with separation anxiety whenever you're about to leave their presence? Are they tearful? Are they despondent? Are they sad and clingy? Or have they become increasingly defiant and demanding? disrespectful, verbally abusive, talking back, damaging property. And this is especially significant if we're talking about a child who previously did not behave this way. So often children will respond either one extreme or the other. They'll be very clingy and anxiety ridden and tearful and kind of whiny, or they become aggressive and defiant, verbally abusive, even threatening towards the victim. Okay, number 6. Does he or she, or if we're talking about you, do you become defensive when someone even suggests that domestic violence may in fact be occurring? When that idea is brought to the forefront, what is the response that is elicited? Do they become angry with you? And if we're talking about you, do you become angry with others who may ask questions because they're concerned about your well-being? Number 7, do they, he or she, or you, if we're talking about you, are you constantly confronted? Are they constantly confronted with extreme jealousy? And by extreme jealousy, I mean circumstances under which others wouldn't even give it a second thought. You're in the grocery store with the partner. Someone passes you in the aisle. They nod and smile and say hello. You say hello in return. And there's a big brouhaha on the way home with demands about who was that? Why did they speak to you? Where do you know them from? Why did you speak to them if you didn't know them at all? And so purely innocent occurrences can elicit this extreme jealousy from an abuser. Is that your experience? Is that the experience of your coworker or your loved one? Because that's another indicator that there is an abusive relationship behind closed doors. Here's another one, number 8. Let's say you've known each other for years. It's a loved one, it's a family member, it's a coworker. It could be you, and you've been close to people. This individual's been close to you. Maybe you grew up together. You've been close your entire life. You've been a support system for one another. But all of a sudden, your calls aren't being returned. The pattern that you've established in your relationship over the years or weeks or months that you've been friends has been deviated from. You no longer talk 2 to 3 times a week. When you do talk, it's very superficial. The conversation is very evasive. And again, this can be your friend or loved one, or it could be you being evasive, not returning calls. This is an indication that something is going on. And whatever is going on, there's no real reasonable explanation for it. There's no explanation that a loved one is going to accept and be okay with. And so it's easier not to communicate and not to engage. And so this is a major underpinning in domestic violence relationships, the isolation. And it's important, while we're talking about this, it's important to recognize that the isolation it can take the form of the abuser being so rude and obnoxious that people don't want to come around. It can be that they create a scene and so people are uncomfortable and they no longer want to come over for dinner. They no longer want to hang out with you, okay? And so that's by design. So their behavior is designed to drive you away. Or it can be that as a result of trauma bonding and as a result of the coercive control tactics that are pervasive in domestic violence relationships and toxic relationships, that the victim becomes distant. The victim breaks off communication. The victim does it, and they oftentimes don't realize that they're being manipulated by the abuser to do just that. So isolation can come in more than one form. Does he or she acknowledge that they're in an abusive relationship? Sometimes people don't realize that they are. Sometimes people don't see it. They are in denial about it. They make excuses for the abuse. They've got all these reasons why this behavior is occurring, all these reasons why they're being treated the way that they're being treated. And then there are those times, right, when a person can acknowledge that they're in a toxic relationship. They can acknowledge that they are in an unhealthy relationship. They can acknowledge that their life may even be in danger in this relationship. However, the most important thing to them is not their personal safety. The most important thing is that they protect the reputation, the social standing, um, of the abuser, that they protect them, that they prevent them from receiving consequences for their behavior. Now, oftentimes, there are some practical reasons for this. If the abuser is the primary breadwinner and they have a well-paid job and it matters to the company that they work for how they conduct themselves when they're not at work, then being charged with domestic violence or having the police respond to your house or whatever could be really bad for their reputation, very bad for the persona that they present outside of the home. And all of this could culminate in the abuser losing employment, right? Which now has a direct bearing on the household from a financial standpoint and would further exacerbate the abuse as the abuser becomes angry for having received the consequence for inappropriate behavior. Okay. And so rather than the primary concern being their own personal safety, for many victims, the primary concern is protecting their reputation. And people of faith struggle with this because scripture has been misappropriated ad nauseum, that and used in such a way, weaponized against victims, so that victims feel that they have a responsibility spiritually to cover the flaws and the weaknesses and the proclivities of the abuser. And so, and this is a form of spiritual abuse when scripture is misappropriated in such a way that victims are discouraged from seeking safety and are encouraged to stay in harm's way, with sacred text being used to convince them that that is the only appropriate response to abuse. Number 10, does he or she or you state that the abuser does not want you to work? They don't want you to work, or they don't want you to work full time, or as you begin to make strides and excel on your job, they don't want you to accept that promotion. They need to keep you in a position where you're dependent on them and where you're not ascending, and improving yourself and growing and gaining strength, because you're more difficult to control if those things begin to take place. And so, does your loved one tell you that their partner doesn't want them to work or only wants them to work part-time? Now, why part-time? Because if you work part-time, usually you don't have any benefits. You don't have any benefits. You're not making that much money and you don't have any benefits. So it's virtually impossible for you to gather enough financial wherewithal, right, to remove yourself from a toxic relationship. And so we're talking about 10 additional things, 10 additional things that when present, and they don't have to all be present. They don't have to all be present. If any one of these 10 additional things is present, it's concerning. If any one of the 10 previous things that we discussed in an earlier video, if any of these things are present, it is cause for concern and further scrutiny is warranted. And so what can you do? What can you do? Educate yourself, right? Subscribe to our channel, watch our videos, share our videos, even with the victims. Educate yourself so that an intervention can be made earlier on in the process. Often by the time loved ones, coworkers figure out that something's wrong, it's too late. It's too late. Things have gone so far that it's like a runaway freight train at that point. And so it's important, beloved, that we purpose in our hearts to be a resource and not a roadblock. Are you a resource or are you a roadblock? Are you doing everything that you possibly can to stop domestic violence? This is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson with Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. We've been talking about 10 additional clues, 10 additional things that we can look for and recognize as red flags that there is domestic violence occurring in a relationship. Now, remember, all wounds are not visible. All wounds are not visible. It's not necessary for things to escalate to a place where physical assault is taking place or sexual assault is taking place in order for it to quantify, in order for it to be considered domestic violence. Domestic violence takes many, many forms, many forms. And so it's our desire that these videos will help us to recognize sooner what the red flags are, whether these things are occurring in the lives of loved ones and coworkers or people that we worship with, or if it's in our own relationship. Thanks for watching. Blessings to you.